Hello everyone, and welcome to our review of Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker. My name is Connor.
Hi, I'm Ben.
This is Ben. We are the Podcast Strikes Back. There's a weird order to do that in. Yeah, guys, we finally seen Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker. This is the final film in the most recent trilogy. This is meant to cap off the whole Skywalker saga, the main films. And we've seen it, and it's been a roller coaster.
It's a lot of responsibility laid at the feet of this movie.
A huge amount.
Luckily, all the fans out there are very reasonable in their expectations and their reactions.
Always.
Of course.
So guys, this is a non-spoiler review. We will have a spoiler review later. So yeah, have a check out of that if you've seen the film. Before we get into the actual review of the film, we always like to start out by saying how we feel about a franchise, you know, if we've seen previous films, where we're coming to this
backstory
franchise.
for you.
So, Ben, why don't you give us a little bit of insight to your relationship with Star Wars?
All right, so I've probably gone over this a million times on this show, but long story short, I've been around obsessive Star Wars fans my whole life, so I've always been very inundated with the Star Wars franchise. I go through periods where I'm more into it than others. I'm never really super huge fan, but that being said, I've seen more things than the average viewer, and I know a lot more about Star Wars than the average person as well, I'm sure. And when I'm really into it, I'm quite into it. Yeah. Just recently, I've been playing the video game Fallen Order, and that's kind of piqued my interest once again. So it was really good timing with the movie coming out and the Mandalorian. Of course.
I have a very similar kind of thing when someone's like, "Oh, are you a Star Wars fan?" You don't want to be too arrogant about it, because there's always someone that's going to pull out all this property that, you know, non-canonical stuff that you're like, "Oh, okay, no, like I'm not that kind of fan."
Yeah,
I don't have that level of knowledge.
I'm the opposite, because I'm like, just because I know that Salacious B. Crumb is a Kowakian monkey lizard doesn't mean that I'm that into the movies or have even seen them that many times.
You have the zeitgeist. You understand that
shit. So then, of course, the whole fandom changed drastically when Disney bought it and renewed it. Force Awakens came out, and that movie seemed controversial at the time. Little did we know. But time goes on. The Last Jedi comes out. I remember watching that the day before it came out and being kind of blown away by it, and then watching it again at the midnight screening, the actual release with George from the show, who's a huge Star Wars fan, and kind of watching it through his eyes and seeing how much he loved it and loving it even more. And then the preceding 2 years of just non-stop people tearing each other apart about so much more than the movie itself. It got the places that argument went were insane. It all got very political, and the actors all weighed in, and the directors. And
I suppose we haven't mentioned that we have an empty seat here. George is actually not with us today. He's
rest in peace.
Yeah, he's overseas. He is seeing it, I believe, tonight. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to try and do is get his thoughts. We'll get him to weigh in, and we'll splice them in at the end of this video so you guys can see what he thinks. Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, I loved The Last Jedi at the time, and at the very beginning actually bothered getting in some heated discussions with people about what I liked about it, what they hated about it, yada yada, and then just after not too long gave up, because it just became such a circuitous argument. But it really made the lead up to this one very difficult and conflicting, because not only was the original director Colin Trevorrow fired, which seemed like a good thing, but then Force Awakens director J.J. Abrams jumps back on board. And then it's...
You weren't a huge fan of The Force Awakens, were you?
No, not really, no. I like a lot about it, but there's a lot of stuff that really irks me. And I just don't have much faith in J.J. Abrams in general. He's made a lot of good stuff, but he also made Star Trek Into Darkness. So it felt like maybe Disney was really reacting to the perceived reaction to The Last Jedi. And what I loved about The Last Jedi was that it was not afraid to just do its own thing and be really bold about it, make its own decisions, cut its own path. So I was afraid that they were just going to walk everything back on that. That being said, all the trailers for this one I thought looked absolutely fantastic. So, and I can never sit down in a Star Wars movie and not be excited once the lights go down. So I was going in with measured expectations, but also kind of keen.
Yeah. So I guess I'm somewhat similar. I watched the original Star Wars somewhat obsessively. I have a very vivid memory of going to when they re-released them in IMAX, I think. Going to that as a kid as well. Like that original trilogy for me was is quite fortifying in my youth. And when the prequels came out, I would have watched Phantom Menace, a million times type thing. Like it was kind of well placed for me at that age.
Me too.
I very recently went back and rewatched the prequels, and I have I don't like them. They will always hold a special place in my heart because of the nostalgia of them, because I enjoyed them as a kid. But looking at them now, trying to enjoy them as movies, I just can't do it because they're not good movies. And they have this great story behind them. They have this great plot. They hit all the right notes, but the execution is just so poor.
Yeah.
And so when they came up with this, we're bringing Disney we're bringing Star Wars back. I was actually quite excited because, one of the limitations of the prequels was the technology. The decision to go with the second one to go digital, I felt was such a poor decision at the end of the day.
Technology wasn't quite there yet.
It wasn't, and that's great that they were trying to push the boundaries, but I don't think they really pulled it off. So I was really excited to see a Star Wars film that perhaps had the interest in terms of story of the prequels, but also the execution of modern day technology. So that really excited me. And what we got was a retelling of A New Hope, with better technology. And quite frankly, I was kind of on board with that. I liked that as a kind of opening welcome to Star Wars in a new generation type movie. And we talked about this a lot. J.J. Abrams, he set out a brief. He said, he didn't try to reinvent the wheel. He goes, this is a Star Wars story. I'm just going to tell it. I'm going to give people the story that they know. I'm going to introduce people to the Star Wars universe, mostly for a new generation. And then we're really going to get into the nuts and bolts later. And that's exactly what I think they did. I'm one of those people that really enjoyed Last Jedi, mostly because I loved how it took risks and it wasn't afraid to potentially upset some of its fandom in pursuit of an interesting storyline. And I think that that's what made the original trilogy so great, is that they weren't. They didn't have to really live within the confines of what people thought that they should do, and that's why Star Wars is what it is. So I think that was a good and necessary risk that was taken by Disney, and I think that there was a little bit of sloppy execution. We've always mentioned around Canto Bight being very iffy, but as a whole, I really appreciate that movie, and so my worry going into this one was, we're bringing back the vanilla director, and I didn't want it to become a nostalgia-ridden fan fest, which, I knew there was going to be a certain amount of that. It's Star Wars. It's always going to be there, but I felt like I wanted the nostalgia to be there for purpose, for a reason. So yeah, I approached it very much similar to you, Ben. I was somewhat apprehensive, but it's a Star Wars film. I was excited. I was sitting there, and the main crawl starts, and you can't help but get that really excited feeling.
It just briefly, when it started, was the music wrong?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, we had a gap in the music. It was a midnight screening, so they were having some technical difficulties.
Some issues in my cinema as well. I guess luckily the Star Wars, you already know what it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. But there's something about that. I watched it in a crowd of close to 800 people, and it was a very it was a very vocal crowd. Not disrespectfully so, we could watch most of the film in silence, but there's moments of that you're obviously meant to cheer or all that kind of stuff, and everyone was really. It was good to watch it in that kind of energetic crowd.
So where do we even start with this thing? Obviously not talking spoilers. There's a lot of this movie we can't talk about.
Yeah. So this is going to be... I think that there's a lot that we can talk about that's vague enough that you're not going to have anything spoiled. What I will say, though, is that I'm really conflicted about this film.
Okay.
Because on the one hand, this film is absolutely fucking gorgeous. Everything from John Williams to the effects, just to the design.
This movie's like 10 out of 10 in every production area.
Oh,
like production
it is,
design, sound design, score, visual effects, special effects, practical effects. It's nuts.
It is unbelievably good. There's only, I think, about 2 scenes that I can think of where I noticeably cringed at the effects. But overall, I thought that from a production standpoint, from a visual standpoint, from a bright lights kind of standpoint, this movie had it in spades.
It's everything you've come to expect and more from this modern franchise.
Yes. Where I get conflicted is that this movie is the definition of playing it safe.
That was my first takeaway. The one word that jumped in my head was safe.
Yeah. It doesn't take any risks. It doesn't try to expand upon the universe in a meaningful way, I think. It knows what kind of nostalgia a lot of the older fan base want, and they are willing to give it to them in spades.
Yeah.
And for me, that was tough because I really loved those moments of nostalgia because I did grow up with Star Wars. And
you kind of want to check yourself every time you do like a little fist pump, don't you? It's like,
yeah.
Oh yeah, I know that thing. It's like, yeah, fuck off.
Yeah.
Demand
it's like
more from your art.
yeah, exactly. And that was very conflicting to me because there was moments where I just let it take me away. And I think that's what a movie should do. I just let the bright lights and the fun of it just kind of sweep over me. And I really enjoyed that. But when you walk out of this film, you kind of feel as though it hasn't taken the risks. It hasn't tried to build something.
Yeah. As the finale of a trilogy that had a lot of lingering questions, a lot of mysteries to be solved, and it does so almost entirely, I don't think there was anything really revelatory in it. There was no moment where I was like, wow, that's the answer to that question. Like, I'm not unsatisfied with what everything was, but it all felt almost expected. And that itself is expected after 2 years of speculating about every possible eventuality that could come out of this, of course. But The Last Jedi had multiple moments that kind of knocked me off my feet. I'm like, wow, I did not expect that. Even simple moments, just like Luke throwing a lightsaber, which so many people hate to death. But I'm like, that was interesting. I want to know where that goes. Whereas this one, everything was kind of going the beats that I expected or just wasn't surprised by. That being said, it is a hell of a viewing experience. This movie moves at such a clip.
Oh my God.
It reminded me of Infinity War in this just propulsive narrative just flying at
not
you
even.
nonstop.
This is a 4-hour movie, I've got to say. Like a 3-4 hour movie that they have clipped down to 2.5, 2:20, something like that.
Well, obviously JJ didn't get to make an Empire remake with the second film because he didn't do the second film. So he had to come in and make an Empire and Return of the Jedi remake all in this film.
Yeah.
And chuck it all into one movie runtime.
I mean, this movie starts off breakneck speed, and I don't think it really slows down
ever
until the end. And that is both entertaining, but also kind of disorientating, and it makes you feel as though you're being your face is being shoved in this, be like, feel the nostalgia, feel the Star Wars, and look how great it is. And you're like, oh, okay, just give me a second to appreciate it. Like,
don't think about it.
Yeah.
Look at it.
So yeah, the pacing in this is ridiculous, and not in a bad way, but not in a great way either.
It works for me. I don't know why. I've just watched it a second time. I've just come from that.
Oh, I'm really I really want to see this a second time.
You got it, yeah, because it's a very different experience than watching a movie at midnight with a huge crowd. I don't know. I've kind of enjoyed this movie a lot both times, even though there are so many elements to it that I can and probably will take issue with at the end of this review. But like there's so many things that I was worried about them doing with this entry after the last one, and you know, whenever they get near something like that, I'm like, oh, but it didn't really bother me in the moment so much. I guess it all moved so quickly and all kind of was so well put together. It felt natural in its own way.
See, I felt there was some clunkiness.
Yes.
And part of the reason for that is that there's two reasons. One is it's not a spoiler. I mean, it's obvious that Carrie Fisher left us. What is it? 2 years ago now?
Something
At
like
least
that,
a year. So and I don't think they had any new footage or very little new footage to use in this.
No, from what I understand, they just had deleted scenes from the previous films.
And that is obviously a very tough thing to do. And they kind of painted themselves into a corner by saying, we're not going to do any CGI. And so they're basically building scenes around
The lines that they had.
Old footage. And that's tough. And I feel like they did the best that they could with what they had, but it doesn't...
It's noticeable.
It's noticeable,
You know
yeah.
what it really reminded me of is when someone takes like a two-shot interview and they replace the interview half of it
Yeah.
to make the person speaking say different things.
Yeah.
Like it really never felt like she was interacting with anyone.
Yeah.
Although I will say, I think it started at its worst and got better throughout the film.
It did progressively get better, yeah.
more natural all the way, which is good.
So there was that clunkiness, but there was also a clunkiness in the sense that this movie had so much explaining to do that it just went ahead and it did it. In the sense that this movie is absolute chock-a-block full of exposition. And that is one of my biggest pet peeves with films, which is unnecessary, or when you're telling me something that you could be showing me, or if you know, you're just like, if it doesn't feel natural, like bad exposition just grates me. And
Do you think there's much of that in this?
there was a lot of exposition.
There was a lot of
in this.
exposition, but I thought it was mostly stuff that the characters would be saying to each other. Like there wasn't a lot of, as you know, yada yada yada.
Not that, but also just this kind of like, there was so much information that it's kind of, it felt like someone was more reading me a list than showing me a movie. You know, it was basically J.J. Abrams being like, all right, we've got like 50 questions to answer. You know, we might be able to show 2 or 3 of them. The rest we're just going to literally say to the audience. And that kind of, to me, feels cheap. And I would have almost rather had questions go unanswered rather than have all of them answered. Or, you know, there's parts of lore that is explained that just feels as though it's almost shoehorned in there.
Yeah, I can't say it bothered me at all, but I do feel like there was a lot of unnecessary information or explanation or just plot thrown into this.
Yep.
Or even characters. And I'm like, I don't know why we have all this in here. But yeah, for whatever reason, it didn't bother me.
Yeah, no, look, like I said, for every plus that I have on this, I kind of have a minus as well in the sense of like, at no point did this movie bore me, but the pacing almost felt too much. You know, I got lots of nostalgia, like fun, bright light stuff, but I also wanted more depth. Like this movie is honestly, it's really conflicting, and I will have to watch it, I think, at least another time, if not 2, and I want to think about it for a couple weeks.
Yeah, I think our opinions on this are going to evolve a lot over the coming months, because context, as I always say, is so important, and coming at this movie with such low expectations as I had in JJ in terms of evolving the story from where the last one left off, I was just, I guess I was maybe settling for less. I don't know, because when I think about it, I'm like, yeah, I don't think they did anything interesting with like the really cool stuff they were doing with the Jedi Order and what the Force was and what like the Jedi, Luke wanted the Jedi to end and everything. I don't think any of that necessarily came into this in a meaningful way, but just sitting there watching like Finn, Poe, and Rey on a mission, I enjoyed so much because I feel like their chemistry has been absolutely squandered in these past 2 movies. they get them together in the first one, and then it's immediately they're
Yeah.
apart, and they're never back together again until this film. And it's such a joy to watch. Those three, Daisy Ridley, John Boyega, and Poe Dameron, are all so
Oscar Isaac
Oscar Isaac.
yeah.
They're so good together.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I really like the actual plot of this is somewhat simplistic and but works for me in that sense.
Can you? I had just a slight segue here. I heard an interesting thing the other day that really made me think. Can you tell me what the plot of The Empire Strikes Back is? Because the point was that it doesn't really have one, and I'm like, it kind of doesn't.
Doesn't really. It's just a series of events.
Yeah, that is great. But I guess it's just kind of like a thought
That's
experiment
interesting.
to
Yeah,
say, yeah, like
I can like tell you scenes, but that doesn't
absolutely,
really
yeah.
constitute
You can,
a plot.
Yeah,
That's
you can
not like an
describe.
arc.
You can describe it, but you can't really succinctly say what the story is necessarily.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I think this kind of falls into a similar boat. It's kind of like it's almost like a video game fetch quest adventure.
Yeah.
With your big battles and whatnot. But I just feel like it's kind of well sewn together. So those three leads are great. Carrie Fisher was good in the sense that she was there. She was doing fine. She obviously wasn't part of this movie.
Yeah.
But I think they did the best they could. I don't think it was too bad the way she was woven into it.
No. And in terms of other actors and their performances, I think everyone did a really good job.
Yes.
I thought that they used what's his name? Barely got any respectable screen time in the first one. John Boyega. John Boyega, they used a lot better in this film. I thought he had his moment to shine. Loved Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver.
Daisy Ridley was outstanding. Adam Driver is always amazing.
I think that they gave their all to these performances. I've been reading some other reviews that have kind of panned them in the sense they kind of said, oh, I don't know that they had too much to work with. But I don't know about that. I think that they made the roles their own. This is certainly the best I've seen Ray in the last three films.
Yeah, I completely disagree with that. I think the three leads, not Adam Driver, were all the best in this one that they've been in any of them.
Yeah.
And I think Adam Driver is he's so great in all of them that I don't think he really stands out as much in this.
Yeah.
But I thought they were all terrific. Who else isn't even in this movie? Ian McDiarmid, of course, returns from both previous trilogies. We can't say anything about him, but I think he's absolutely fantastic as Darth Sidious. We can't discuss that role, obviously. We'll talk about him later.
Yep.
We've got a few new characters. We've got Zuri Bliss, played by Kerry Russell.
Yeah.
Kind of a link to Poe Dameron. I thought she was really cool. I liked her.
Yeah, I always struggle when they add new characters in on like the third of a trilogy, and you're kind of like, we are already dealing with a lot, man. Like, just chill.
And I completely agree with that.
I liked her though. That's the problem. Like, I liked the character. It was just a lot.
That's the thing. That's what really endears me to this movie is I really like all the stuff they added. There's a bunch of new characters, a bunch of new aliens, a bunch of new species, creatures, droids, whatever. I really liked all of them.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that I can think of that really shat me in terms of that, like of them adding anything.
No, but not even that. Like, it's not like I don't mind this. Like, I really liked them. Like, I there's a couple of new little characters in this who I love as much as Baby Yoda, which
that is a big
ridiculous.
call.
I know, and I'm like, both times I've watched it, they've just made me so happy. C-3PO is a decent sized subplot in this. I thought he was fantastic. I can't believe I'm coming out of this final Skywalker film being like, I really like the C-3PO stuff in this.
This is the best C-3PO has been ever. Easily.
I think so, yeah. Because I literally said a few weeks ago on the lead up to this movie, I'm like, no one ever liked C-3PO. And I come out of this, I'm like, there's one other one I wanted to mention. Billy D. Williams is back, of course. He's there. He's part of that whole nostalgia kind of angle of the film, I think.
Yeah. I didn't really have much.
Yeah.
He got the big cheer when he showed up.
That's what he's there for.
Should we move on to spoilers? I feel
guess
like there's so much of this film that we need to talk about in terms of spoilers. It's very hard to talk about without it. So for everyone that hasn't seen the film, get on out of
Give
here.
a little wrap up?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do a quick kind of last thoughts, and then we'll move on to spoilers. I think for me, my final thoughts are the same as my first thoughts, which is that this movie is this kind of... It is a very safe version of what this could have been. It doesn't take any risks. It doesn't do anything that I think...
Doesn't push any boundaries.
It didn't really push any boundaries. It kind of superfluously did it a couple of times, but generally speaking, didn't really expand on the Star Wars narrative
If anything,
too much.
I think it might have worked back a few areas that the last one sort of pushed forward.
This movie does a lot of explaining to the audience. But having said that, it is a spectacular production. And it is an incredible amount of fun if you're looking for that kind of nostalgia. They put a lot of bright lights in front of you, and they put a lot of like a, hey, remember this thing, or do this thing, and it's cheap, but it's fun. So I think if you let it will kind of carry you away for that.
Yeah, I may have to like seriously retract this a few months down the line, but at the moment this might be my favorite of the new trilogy, and therefore the new Disney movies as well. I think Last Jedi is better in a lot of ways and much more interesting in just about every way, but this one is just such a good time, and it's so well put together. It moves at such a pace. It's a lot of fun, and I think it's so much better at balancing the nostalgia and the new stuff than something like Force Awakens, which made me want to rip my hair out. You know, when Han and Chewie come in, it's like, we're home, and all the adults in the audience are crying. That really annoyed me. Whereas in this, I think there are a lot of moments that are just like, yes, here's a thing you know from your childhood. Recognize this. And you do. You're like, yeah, cool. But it just feels a little less gratuitous. And I'm maybe overpraising this right now because I'm going to tear it apart in spoilers. But that's, yeah, I think it's really good, well worth the shot.